Todd Young Online presents Young Tales. Tales for the young and the young at heart. Today's story: Mr. Toad Gets into Trouble. Episode 4 of The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. It was a bright morning in the early part of the summer. The river had resumed its wonted banks and its accustomed pace, and a hot sun seemed to be pulling everything green and bushy and spiky up out of the earth towards him, as if by strings. The mole and the water rat had been up since dawn, very busy on matters connected with boats and the opening of the boating season, painting and varnishing, mending paddles, repairing cushions, hunting for missing boat hooks, and so on, and were finishing breakfast in their little parlor and eagerly discussing their plans for the day when a heavy knock sounded at the door. "Father," said the rat, all over egg. "See who it is, Mole, like a good chap, since you finished." The mole went to attend the summons, and the rat heard him utter a cry of surprise. Then he flung the parlor door open and announced with much importance, "Mr. Badger!" This was a wonderful thing indeed, that the badger should pay a formal call on them, or indeed anybody. He generally had to be caught if you wanted him badly, and as he slipped quietly along a hedgerow of an early morning or a late evening, or else hunted up in his own house in the middle of the wood, which was a serious undertaking. The badger strode heavily into the room and stood looking at the two animals with an expression full of seriousness. The rat let his egg spoon fall on the tablecloth and sat open-mouthed. "The hour has come," said the badger at last with great solemnity. "What hour?" asked the rat uneasily, glancing at the clock on the mantelpiece. "Whose hour, you should say, rather," replied the badger. "Why, Toad's hour, the hour of Toad. I said I would take him in hand as soon as the winter was well over, and I'm going to take him in hand today." "Toad's hour, of course!" cried the mole delightedly. "Hooray, I remember now. We'll teach him to be a sensible toad." "This very morning," continued the badger, taking an armchair, "as I learnt last night from a trustworthy source, another new and exceptionally powerful motor car will arrive at Toad Hall on approval or return. At this very moment, perhaps, Toad is busy arraying himself in those singularly hideous habiliments so dear to him, which transform him from a comparatively good-looking toad into an object which throws any decent-minded animal that comes across into a violent fit. We must be up and doing, ere it is too late. You two animals will accompany me instantly to Toad Hall, and the work of rescue shall be accomplished." "Right you are!" cried the rat, starting up. "We'll rescue the poor unhappy animal. We'll convert him. He'll be the most converted toad that ever was before we've done with him." They set off up the road on their mission of mercy, Badger leading the way. Animals, when in company, walk in a proper and sensible manner, in single file instead of sprawling all across the road and being of no use or support to each other in case of sudden, terrible danger. They reached the carriage drive of Toad Hall to find, as Badger had anticipated, a shiny new motor car of great size, painted a bright red, Toad's favorite color, standing in front of the house. As they neared the door, it was flung open, and Mr. Toad, arrayed in goggles, cap, gaiters, and enormous overcoat, came swaggering down the steps, drawing on his gauntleted gloves. "Hello, come on, you fellows," he cried cheerfully on catching sight of them. "You're just in time to come with me for a jolly. His hearty accents faltered and fell away as he noticed the stern, unbending look on the countenances of his silent friends, and his invitation remained unfinished. The badger strode up the steps. "Take him inside," he said sternly to his companions. Then, as Toad was hustled through the door, struggling and protesting, he turned to the chauffeur in charge of the new motor car. "I'm afraid you won't be wanted today," he said. "Mr. Toad has changed his mind. He will not require the car. Please understand that this is final. You needn't wait." Then he followed the others inside and shut the door. "Now then," he said to the Toad when the four of them stood together in the hall, "first of all, take those ridiculous things off." "Shan't," replied Toad with great spirit. "What is the meaning of this gross outrage? I demand an instant explanation." "Take them off him, then, you two," ordered the badger briefly. They had to lay Toad out on the floor, kicking and calling all sorts of names before they could get to work properly. Then the rat sat on him, and the mole got his motor clothes off him bit by bit, and they stood him up on his legs again. A good deal of his blustering spirit seemed to have evaporated with the removal of his fine panoply. Panoply? Now that he was merely Toad and no longer the terror of the highway, he giggled feebly and looked from one to the other appealingly, seeming quite to understand the situation. "You knew it must come to this sooner or later, Toad," the Badger explained severely. "You've disregarded all the warnings we've given you. You've gone on squandering the money your father left you, and you're getting us animals a bad name in the district by your furious driving and your smashes and your rows with the police. Independence is all very well, but we animals never allow our friends to make fools of themselves beyond a certain limit, and that limit you've reached. Now, you're a good fellow in many respects, and I don't want to be too hard on you. I'll make one more effort to bring you to reason. You will come with me into the smoking room, and there you will hear some facts about yourself. And we'll see whether you come out of that room the same Toad that you went in." He took Toad firmly by the arm, led him into the smoking room, and closed the door behind them. "That's no good," said the rat contemptuously. "Talking to Toad'll never cure him. He'll say anything." They made themselves comfortable in armchairs and waited patiently. Through the closed door, they could just hear the long, continuous drone of the Badger's voice, rising and falling in waves of oratory, and presently they noticed that the sermon began to be punctuated at intervals by long-drawn sobs, evidently proceeding from the bosom of Toad, who was a soft-hearted and affectionate fellow, very easily converted, for the time being, to any point of view. After some 3/4 of an hour, the door opened, and the Badger reappeared, solemnly leading by the paw a very limp and dejected Toad. His skin hung baggily about him, his legs wobbled, and his cheeks were furrowed by the tears so plentifully called forth by the Badger's moving discourse. "Sit down there, Toad," said the Badger kindly, pointing to a chair. "My friends," he went on, "I am pleased to inform you that Toad has at last seen the error of his ways. He is truly sorry for his misguided conduct in the past, and he has undertaken to give up motor cars entirely and forever. I have his solemn promise to that effect." "That is very good news," said the mole gravely. "Very good news indeed," observed the rat dubiously. If only. He was looking very hard at Toad as he said this, and could not help thinking he perceived something vaguely resembling a twinkle in that animal's still sorrowful eye. "There's only one thing more to be done," continued the gratified Badger. "Toad, I want you solemnly to repeat, before your friends here, what you fully admitted to me in the smoking room just now. First, you are sorry for what you've done, and you see the folly of it all?" There was a long, long pause. Toad looked desperately this way and that, while the other animals waited in grave silence. At last he spoke. "No," he said a little sullenly but stoutly. "I'm not sorry, and it wasn't folly at all. It was simply glorious." "What?" cried the Badger, greatly scandalized. "You backsliding animal, didn't you tell me just now in there?" "Oh, yes, in there," said Toad impatiently. "I'd have said anything in there. You're so eloquent, dear Badger, and so moving and so convincing, and put all your points so frightfully well. You can do what you like with me in there, and you know it. But I've been searching my mind since and going over things in it, and I find that I'm not a bit sorry or repentant, really, so it's no earthly good saying I am, now is it?" "Then you don't promise," said the Badger, "never to touch a motor car again?" "Certainly not," replied Toad emphatically. "On the contrary, I faithfully promise that the very first motor car I see, poop, poop, off I go in it." "Told you so, didn't I?" observed the rat to them all. "Very well, then," said the Badger firmly, rising to his feet. "Since you won't yield to persuasion, we'll try what force can do. I feared it would come to this all along. You've often asked us three to come and stay with you, Toad, in this handsome house of yours. Well, now we're going to. And when we've converted you to a proper point of view, we may quit, but not before. Take him upstairs, you two, and lock him up in his bedroom. We will, while we arrange matters between ourselves. It's for your own good, Toady, said the rat kindly, as Toad, kicking and struggling, was hauled up the stairs by his two faithful friends. Think what fun we shall all have together, just as we used to, when you've quite got over this painful attack of yours. We'll take great care of everything for you till you're well, Toad, said the mole, and we'll see your money isn't wasted as it has been. No more of those regrettable incidents with the police, Toad, said the rat, as they thrust him into his bedroom. And no more weeks in hospital being ordered about by female nurses, Toad, added the mole, turning the key on him. They descended the stair, Toad shouting abuse at them through the keyhole, and the three friends then met in conference on the situation. It's going to be a tedious business, said the badger, sighing. I've never seen Toad so determined. However, we will see it out. He must never be left an instant unguarded. We shall have to take it in turns to be with him till the poison has worked itself out of his system. They arranged watches accordingly. Each animal took it in turns to sleep in Toad's room at night, and they divided the day up between them. At first, Toad was undoubtedly very trying to his careful guardians. When his violent paroxysms possessed him, he would arrange bedroom chairs in rude resemblance of a motor car and would crouch on the foremost of them, bent forward and staring fixedly ahead, making uncouth and ghastly noises till the climax was reached, when, turning a complete somersault, he would lie prostrate amidst the ruins of the chairs, apparently completely satisfied for the moment. As time passed, however, these painful seizures grew gradually less frequent, and his friends strove to divert his mind into fresh channels. But his interest in other matters did not seem to revive, and he grew apparently languid and depressed. One morning, the rat, whose turn it was to go on duty, went upstairs to relieve Badger, whom he found fidgeting to be off and stretch his legs in a long ramble round his wood and down his earths and burrows. Toad's still in bed, he told the rat outside the door. Can't get much out of him except, leave him alone. He wants nothing. Perhaps he'll be better presently. It may pass off in time. Don't be duly anxious, and so on. Now, you look out, rat. When Toad's quiet and submissive and playing at being the hero of a Sunday school prize, then he's at his artfulest. There's sure to be something up. I know him. Well, now I must be off. How are you today, old chap? Inquired the rat cheerfully as he approached Toad's bedside. He had to wait some minutes for an answer. At last, a feeble voice replied, Thank you so much, dear Ratty. So good of you to inquire. But first, tell me how you are yourself and the excellent mole. Oh, we're all right, replied the rat. Mole, he added incautiously, is going out for a run round with Badger. They'll be out till luncheon time, so you and I will spend a pleasant morning together, and I'll do my best to amuse you. Now jump up, there's a good fellow, and don't lie moping there on a fine morning like this. Dear kind rat, murmured Toad, how little you realize my condition, and how far I am from jumping up now, if ever. But do not trouble about me. I hate being a burden to my friends, and I do not expect to be one much longer. Indeed, I almost hope not. Well, I hope not too, said the rat heartily. You've been a fine bother to us all this time, and I'm glad to hear it's going to stop. And in weather like this, and the boating season just beginning, it's too bad of you, Toad. It isn't the trouble we mind, but you're making us miss such an awful lot. I'm afraid it is the trouble, mind you, though, replied the Toad languidly. I can quite understand it. It's natural enough. You're tired of bothering about me. I mustn't ask you to do anything further. I'm a nuisance, you know. You are indeed, said the rat, but I tell you I'd take any trouble on earth for you if only you'd be a sensible animal. If I thought that, Ratty, murmured Toad more feebly than ever. "Then I would beg you for the last time, probably, to step round to the village as quickly as possible. Even now it may be too late, and fetch the doctor, but don't bother. It's only a trouble, and perhaps we may as well let things take their course." "Why, what do you want a doctor for?" inquired the rat, coming closer and examining him. He certainly lay very still and flat, and his voice was weaker and his manner much changed. "Surely you have noticed of late," murmured Toad, "but no, why should you? Noticing things is only a trouble. Tomorrow, indeed, you may be saying to yourself, 'Oh, if only I had noticed sooner, if only I had done something.' But no, it's a trouble. Never mind. Forget that I asked." "Look here, old man," said the rat, beginning to get rather alarmed. "Of course I'll fetch the doctor to you if you really think you want him. But you can hardly be bad enough for that yet. Let's talk about something else." "I fear, dear friend," said Toad with a sad smile, "that talk can do little in a case like this, or doctors either, for that matter. Still, one must grasp at the slightest straw, and by the way, while you are about it, I hate to give you additional trouble, but I happen to remember that you will pass the door. Would you mind at the same time asking the lawyer to step up? It would be a convenience to me, and there are moments, perhaps I should ask, there is a moment when one must face disagreeable tasks at whatever cost to exhausted nature. A lawyer? Oh, he must be really bad," the affrighted rat said to himself, and he hurried from the room, not forgetting, however, to lock the door carefully behind him. Outside, he stopped to consider. The other two were far away, and he had no one to consult. "It's best to be on the safe side," he said on reflection. "I've known Toad fancy himself frightfully bad before, without the slightest reason, but I've never heard him ask for a lawyer. If there's nothing really the matter, the doctor will tell him he's an old ass and cheer him up, and that will be something gained. I'd better humor him and go. It won't take very long." So he ran off to the village on his errand of mercy. The Toad, who had hopped lightly out of bed as soon as he heard the key turn in the lock, watched him eagerly from the window till he disappeared down the carriage drive. Then, laughing heartily, he dressed as quickly as possible in the smartest suit he could lay hands on at the moment, filled his pockets with cash which he took from a small drawer in the dressing table, and next, knotting the sheets from his bed together and tying one end of the improvised rope round the central mullion of the handsome two-door window which formed such a feature of his bedroom, he scrambled out, slid lightly to the ground, and taking the opposite direction to the rat, marched off light-heartedly, whistling a merry tune. It was a gloomy luncheon for Rat when the Badger and the Mole at length returned, and he had to face them at table with his pitiful and unconvincing story. The Badger's caustic, not to say brutal remarks may be imagined and therefore passed over, but it was painful to the Rat that even the Mole, though he took his friend's side as far as possible, could not help saying, "You've been a bit of a duffer this time, Ratty. Toad, too, of all animals." "He did it awfully well," said the crestfallen Rat. "He did you awfully well," rejoined the Badger hotly. "However, talking won't mend matters. He's got to clear away for the time. That's certain. And the worst of it is, he'll be so conceited with what he'll think he is his cleverness that he may commit any folly. One comfort is, we're free now. We needn't waste any more of our precious time doing sentry go. But we'd better continue to sleep at Toad Hall for a while longer. Toad may be brought back at any moment on a stretcher or between two policemen." So spoke the Badger, not knowing what the future held in store or how much water and of how turbid a character was to run under bridges before Toad should sit at ease again in his ancestral hall. Meanwhile, Toad, gay and irresponsible, was walking briskly along the high road, some miles from home. At first, he had taken bypaths and crossed many fields and changed his course several times in case of pursuit. But now, Feeling by this time safe from recapture and the sun smiling brightly on him and all nature joining in a chorus of approval to the song of self-praise that his own heart was singing to him, he almost danced along the road in his satisfaction and conceit. "Smart piece of work, that," he remarked to himself, chuckling. "Brain against brute force, and brain came out on top, as it's bound to do. Poor old Rat. My, won't he catch it when Badger gets back? A worthy fellow, Ratty, with many good qualities, but very little intelligence and absolutely no education. I must take him in hand some day and see if I can make something of him." Filled full of conceited thoughts such as these, he strode along, his head in the air till he reached a little town where the sign of the Red Lion swinging across the road halfway down the main street reminded him that he had not breakfasted that day and that he was exceedingly hungry after his long walk. He marched into the inn, ordered the best luncheon that could be provided at so short a notice, and sat down to eat it in the coffee room. He was about halfway through his meal when an only too familiar sound approaching down the street made him start and fall a-trembling all over. The poop-poop drew nearer and nearer. The car could be heard to turn into the inn-yard and come to a stop, and Toad had to hold on to the leg of the table to conceal his overmastering emotion. Presently, the party entered the coffee room, hungry, talkative, and gay, voluble on their experiences of the morning and the merits of the chariot that had brought them along so well. Toad listened eagerly, all ears for a time. At last, he could stand it no longer. He slipped out of the room quietly, paid his bill at the bar, and as soon as he got outside, sauntered round quietly to the inn-yard. "There cannot be any harm," he said to himself. "I am only just looking at it." The car stood in the middle of the yard, quite unattended, the stable helps and other hangers-on being all at their dinner. Toad walked slowly round it, inspecting, criticizing, musing deeply. "I wonder," he said to himself presently, "I wonder if this sort of car starts easily." Next moment, hardly knowing how it came about, he found he had hold of the handle and was turning it. As the familiar sound broke forth, the old passion seized on Toad and completely mastered him, body and soul. As if in a dream, he found himself somehow seated in the driver's seat, as if in a dream. He pulled the lever and swung the car around the yard and out through the archway, and as if in a dream, all sense of right and wrong, all fear of obvious consequences, seemed temporarily suspended. He increased his pace, and as the car devoured the street and leapt forth on the high road through the open country, he was only conscious that he was Toad once more. Toad at his best and highest. Toad the terror. Toad the traffic queller. The lord of the lone trail, before whom all must give way or be smitten into nothingness and everlasting night. He chanted as he flew, and the car responded with sonorous drone. The miles were eaten up under him, and as he sped, he knew not whither, fulfilling his instincts, living his hour, reckless of what might come to him. "To my mind," observed the chairman of the bench of magistrates, cheerfully, "the only difficulty that presents itself in this otherwise very clear case is how we can possibly make it sufficiently hot for the incorrigible rogue and hardened ruffian whom we see cowering in the dock before us. Let me see. He has been found guilty, on the clearest evidence, first, of stealing a valuable motor car. Secondly, of driving to the public danger, and thirdly, of gross impertinence to the rural police. Mr. Clerk, will you tell us, please, what is the very stiffest penalty we can impose for each of these offenses? Without, of course, giving the prisoner the benefit of any doubt, because there isn't any." The clerk scratched his nose with his pen. "Some people would consider," he observed, "that stealing the motor car was the worst offense, and so it is. But cheeking the police undoubtedly carries the severest penalty, and so it ought. Supposing you were to say 12 months for the theft, which is mild, and 3 years for the furious driving, which is lenient, and 15 years for the cheek, which was pretty bad sort of cheek, judging by what we've heard from the witness box. even if you only believe 1/10 part of what you heard. And I never believed more myself. Those figures, if added together correctly, taught up to 19 years. First rate, said the chairman. So you had better make it around 20 years and be on the safe side, concluded the clerk. An excellent suggestion, said the chairman approvingly. Prisoner, pull yourself together and try and stand up straight. It's going to be 20 years for you this time. And mind, if you appear before us again upon any charge whatever, we shall have to deal with you very seriously. Then the brutal minions of the law fell upon the hapless Toad, loaded him with chains, and dragged him from the courthouse, shrieking, praying, protesting. Across the marketplace where the playful populace, always as severe upon detected crime as they are sympathetic and helpful when one is merely wanted, assailed him with jeers, carrots, and popular catchwords. Past hooting school children, their innocent faces lit up with the pleasure they ever derive from the sight of a gentleman in difficulties, across the hollow-sounding drawbridge, below the spiky portcullis, under the frowning archway of the grim old castle whose ancient towers soared high overhead, past guard rooms full of grinning soldiery off duty, past sentries who coughed in a horrid sarcastic way because that is as much as a sentry on his post dare do to show his contempt and abhorrence of a crime. Up time-worn, winding streets, past men-at-arms in casket and corselet of steel, darting threatening looks through their vizards across courtyards where mastiffs strained at their leash and pawed at the air to get at him. Past ancient warders, their halberds leaned against the wall, dozing over a pasty and a flagon of brown ale. On and on past the rack chamber and the thumbscrew room, past the turning that led to the private scaffold till they reached the door of the grimmest dungeon that lay in the heart of the innermost keep. There at last they paused where an ancient jailer sat fingering a bunch of mighty keys. Odds bodkins, says the sergeant of police, taking off his helmet and wiping his forehead. Rouse the old loon and take over from us this vile Toad, a criminal of deepest guilt and matchless artfulness and resource. Watch and ward him with all thy skill, and mark thee well, Greybeard. Should aught untoward befall, thy old head shall answer for his, and a murrain on both of them. The jailer nodded grimly. Laying his withered hand on the shoulder of the miserable Toad, the rusty key creaked in the lock. The great door clanged behind them, and Toad was a helpless prisoner in the remotest dungeon of the best guarded keep in the stoutest castle in all the length and breadth of merry England. The willow wren was twittering his thin little song, hidden himself in the dark selvage of the river bank. Though it was past 10 o'clock at night, the sky still clung to and retained some lingering skirts of light from the departed day. And the sullen heats of the torrid afternoon broke up and rolled away at the dispersing touch of the cool fingers of the short midsummer night. Mole lay stretched on the bank, still panting from the stress of the fierce day that had been cloudless from dawn to late sunset, and waited for his friend to return. He had been on the river with some companions, leaving the water rat free to keep an engagement of long standing with Otter. And he had come back to find the house dark and deserted and no sign of Rat, who was doubtless keeping it up late with his old comrade. It was still too hot to think of staying indoors, so he lay on some cool dock leaves and thought over the past day and its doings and how very good they all had been. The rat's light footfall was presently heard, approaching over the parched grass. "Oh, that blessed coolness," he said, and sat down, gazing thoughtfully into the river, silent and preoccupied. "You stayed to supper, of course," said the mole presently. "Simply had to," said the rat. "They wouldn't hear of my going before. And you know how kind they always are, and they made things as jolly for me as ever they could, right up to the moment I left. But I felt a brute all the time, and as it was clear to me, they were very unhappy, though they tried to hide it. Mole, I'm afraid they're in trouble. Little Portly is missing again, and you know what a lot his father thinks of him. though he never says much about it. "What? That child?" said the mole lightly. "Well, suppose he is. Why worry about it? He's always straying off and getting lost and turning up again. He's so adventurous. But no harm ever happens to him. Everybody hereabouts knows him and likes him just as they do old Otter. And you may be sure some animal or other will come across him and bring him back again, all right. Why, we found him ourselves miles from home and quite self-possessed and cheerful." "Yes, but this time it's more serious," said the rat gravely. "He's been missing for some days now, and the otters have hunted everywhere, high and low, without finding the slightest trace. And they've asked every animal, too, for miles around, and nobody knows anything about him. Otter's evidently more anxious than he'll admit. I got out of him that young Portly hasn't learned to swim very well yet, and I can see he's thinking of the weir. There's a lot of water coming down still, considering the time of year, and the place always had a fascination for the child. And then there are, well, traps and things, you know. Otter's not the fellow to be nervous about any son of his before its time, and now he is nervous. When I left, he came out with me, said he wanted some air, and talked about stretching his legs. But I could see it wasn't that, so I drew him out and pumped him, and got it all from him at last. He was going to spend the night watching by the ford. You know, the place where the old ford used to be in bygone days before they built the bridge?" "I know it well," said the mole, "but why should Otter choose to watch there?" "Well, it seems that it was there he gave Portly his first swimming lesson," continued the rat. "From that shallow, gravelly spit near the bank, and it was there he used to teach him fishing, and there young Portly caught his first fish, of which he was so very proud. The child loved that spot, and Otter thinks that if he came wandering back from wherever he is, if he is anywhere by this time, poor little chap, he might make for the ford he was so fond of. Or if he came across it, he'd remember it well and stop there and play, perhaps. So Otter goes there every night and watches on the chance, just on the chance." They were silent for a time, both thinking of the same thing. The lonely, heart-sore animal crouched by the ford, watching and waiting the long night through on the chance. Well, said the rat presently, "I suppose we ought to be thinking about turning in." But he never offered to move. "Rat," said the mole, "I simply can't go in and turn in and go to sleep and do nothing, even though there doesn't seem to be anything to be done. We'll get the boat out and paddle upstream. The moon will be up in an hour or so, and then we will search as well as we can. Anyhow, it will be better than going to bed and doing nothing." "Just what I was thinking myself," said the rat. "It's not the sort of night for bed anyhow, and daybreak is not so very far off. And then we may pick up some news of him and early risers as we go along." They got out the boat, and the rat took the sculls, paddling with caution. Out in midstream, there was a clear, narrow track that faintly reflected the sky, but wherever shadows fell on the water from bank, bush, or tree, they were as solid to all appearances as the banks themselves, and the mole had to steer with judgment accordingly. Dark and deserted as it was, the night was full of small noises, song and chatter and rustling, telling of the busy little population who were up and about, plying their trades and vocations through the night till sunshine should fall on them and at last send them off to their well-earned repose. The water's own noises, too, were more apparent than by day, its gurglings and cloops, more unexpected and near at hand. And constantly they started at what seemed a sudden clear call from an actual articulate voice. The line of the horizon was clear and hard against the sky, and in one particular quarter it showed black against a silvery climbing phosphorescence that grew and grew. At last, over the rim of the waiting earth, the moon lifted with slow majesty till it swung clear of the horizon and rode off, free of moorings, and once more they began to see surfaces, meadows widespread and quiet gardens, and the river itself from bank to bank, all softly disclosed, all washed clean of mystery and terror, all radiant again as by day, but with a difference that was tremendous. Their old haunts greeted them again in other raiment, as if they had slipped away and put on this pure new apparel and come quietly back, smiling as they shyly waited to see if they would be recognized again under it. Fastening their boat to a willow, the friends landed in this silent silver kingdom and patiently explored the hedges, the hollow trees, the runnels and their little culverts, the ditches, and the dry waterways. Embarking again and crossing over, they worked their way up the stream in this manner, while the moon, serene and detached in a cloudless sky, did what she could, though so far off, to help them in their quest. Till her hour came and she sank earthwards reluctantly and left them, and a mystery once more held field and river. Then a change began slowly to declare itself. The horizon became clear, field and tree came more into sight, and somehow with a different look, the mystery began to drop away from them. A bird piped suddenly and was still, and a light breeze sprang up and set the reeds and bulrushes rustling. Rat, who was in the stern of the boat while Mole sculled, sat up suddenly and listened with a passionate intentness. Mole, who with gentle strokes was just keeping the boat moving while he scanned the banks with care, looked at him with curiosity. "It's gone," sighed the rat, sinking back into his seat again. "So beautiful and strange and new. Since it was to end so soon, I almost wish I had never heard it. For it has roused a longing in me that is pain, and nothing seems worthwhile but just to hear that sound once more and go on listening to it forever. No, there it is again," he cried, alert once more. Entranced, he was silent for a long space, spellbound. "Now it passes on, and I began to lose it," he said presently. "Oh, Mole, the beauty of it, the merry bubble and joy, the thin, clear, happy call of the distant piping. Such music I never dreamed of, and the call in it is stronger even than the music is sweet. Row on, Mole, row, for the music and the call must be for us." The Mole, greatly wondering, obeyed. "I hear nothing myself," he said, "but the wind playing in the reeds and the rushes and the osiers." The rat never answered, if indeed he heard. Rapt, transported, trembling, he was possessed in all his senses by this new divine thing that caught up his helpless soul and swung and dandled it, a powerless but happy infant in a strong, sustaining grasp. In silence, Mole rowed steadily, and soon they came to a point where the river divided, a long backwater branching off to one side. With a slight movement of his head, Rat, who had long dropped the rudder lines, directed the rower to take the backwater. The creeping tide of light gained and gained, and now they could see the color of the flowers that gemmed the water's edge. "Clearer and nearer still," cried the rat joyously. "Now you must surely hear it. Ah, at last I see you do." Breathless and transfixed, the Mole stopped rowing as the liquid run of that glad piping broke on him like a wave, caught him up, and possessed him utterly. He saw the tears on his comrade's cheeks and bowed his head and understood. For a space they hung there, brushed by the purple loosestrife that fringed the bank. Then the clear, imperious summons that marched hand in hand with the intoxicating melody imposed its will on Mole, and mechanically he bent to his oars again. And the light grew steadily stronger, but no birds sang as they were wont to do at the approach of dawn. And but for the heavenly music, all was marvelously still. On either side of them they glided onwards. The rich meadow grass seemed that morning of a freshness and greenness unsurpassable. Never had they noticed the roses so vividly, the willow herb so riotous, the meadow sweet so odorous and pervading. Then the murmur of the approaching weir began to hold the air, and they felt a consciousness that they were nearing the end, whatever it might be that surely awaited their expedition. A wide half-circle of foam and glinting lights and shining shoulders of green water. The great weir closed the backwater from bank to bank, troubled all the quiet surface from twirling eddies and floating foam streaks, and deadened all other sounds with its solemn and soothing rumble. In the midmost of the stream, embraced in the weir's shimmering arm spread, a small island lay anchored, fringed close with willow and silver birch and alder, reserved, shy, but full of significance. It hid whatever might hold behind a veil, keeping it till the hour should come, and within the hour, those who were called and chosen. Slowly, but with no doubt or hesitation whatsoever, and in something of a solemn expectancy, the two animals passed through the broken, tumultuous water and moored their boat at the flowery margin of the island. In silence, they landed and pushed through the blossom and scented herbage and undergrowth that led up to the level ground, till they stood on a little lawn of a marvelous green, set round with nature's own orchard trees, crabapple, wild cherry, and sloe. This is the place of my song dream, the place the music played to me, whispered the rat as if in a trance. Here, in this holy place, here, if anywhere, surely we shall find him. Then suddenly the mole felt a great awe fall upon him, an awe that turned his muscles to water, bowed his head, and rooted his feet to the ground. It was no panic terror. Indeed, he felt wonderfully at peace and happy, but it was an awe that smote and held him, and without seeing, he knew it could only mean that some august presence was very, very near. With difficulty, he turned to look for his friend and saw him at his side, cowed, stricken, and trembling violently. And still there was utter silence in the populous, bird-haunted branches around them, and still the light grew and grew. Perhaps he would never have dared to raise his eyes, but that, though the piping was now hushed, the call and the summons seemed still dominant and imperious. He might not refuse were death himself waiting to strike him instantly, once he had looked with mortal eye on things rightly kept hidden. Trembling, he obeyed, and raised his humble head, and then, in that utter clearness of the imminent dawn, while nature, flushed with fullness of incredible color, seemed to hold her breath for the event, he looked in the very eyes of the friend and helper, saw the backward sweep of the curved horns, gleamed in the growing daylight, saw the stern hooked nose between the kindly eyes that were looking down on them humorously, while the bearded mouth broke into a half smile at the corners, saw the rippling muscles on the arm that lay across the broad chest, the long supple hand still holding the panpipes only just fallen away from the parted lips, saw the splendid curves of the shaggy limbs disposed in the majestic ease on the sward, saw, last of all, nestling between his very hooves, sleeping soundly in entire peace and contentment, the little, round, podgy, childish form of the baby otter. All this he saw, for one moment breathless and intense, vivid on the morning sky, and still as he looked, he lived, and still as he lived, he wondered. Rat! He found the breath to whisper, shaking. Are you afraid? Afraid? Murmured the rat, his eyes shining with unutterable love. Afraid? Of him? Oh, never, never. And yet, oh, mole, I am afraid. Then the two animals, crouching to the earth, bowed their heads and did worship. Sudden and magnificent, the sun's broad golden disk showed itself over the horizon facing them, and the first rays, shooting across the level water meadows, took the animals full in the eyes and dazzled them. When they were able to look once more, the vision had vanished, and the air was full of the carol of birds that hailed at dawn. As they stared blankly, in dumb misery deepening as they slowly realized all they had seen and all they had lost, a capricious little breeze dancing up from the surface of the water tossed the aspens, shook the dewy roses, and blew lightly and caressingly in their faces, and with its soft touch came instant oblivion. For this is the last best gift that the kindly demigod is careful to bestow on those to whom he has revealed himself in their helping. The gift of forgetfulness, lest the awful remembrance should remain and grow and overshadow mirth and pleasure, and the great haunting memory should spoil all the afterlives of little animals helped out of difficulties, in order that they should be happy and light-hearted as before. Mole rubbed his eyes and stared at Rat, who was looking about him in a puzzled sort of way. I beg your pardon, what did you say, Rat? He asked. I think I was only remarking, said Rat slowly, that this was the right sort of place and that here, if anywhere, we should find him. And look, why, there he is, the little fellow. And with a cry of delight, he ran towards the slumbering Portly. But Mole stood still a moment, held in thought, as one wakened suddenly from a beautiful dream who struggles to recall it and can recapture nothing but a dim sense of the beauty of it. The beauty! Till that too fades away in its turn, and the dreamer bitterly accepts the hard, cold waking and all its penalties. So Mole, after struggling with his memory for a brief space, shook his head sadly and followed the rat. Portly woke up with a joyous squeak and wriggled with pleasure at the sight of his father's friends who had played with him so often in the past days. In a moment, however, his face grew blank, and he fell to hunting round in a circle with pleading whine. As a child that has fallen happily asleep in its nurse's arms and wakes to find itself alone and laid in a strange place, and searches corners and cupboards and runs from room to room, despair growing silently in its heart, even so Portly searched the island and searched, dogged and unwearying, until at last the black moment came for giving it up and sitting down and crying bitterly. The Mole ran quickly to comfort the little animal, but Rat, lingering, looked long and doubtfully at certain hoof marks deep in the sward. Some great animal has been here, he murmured slowly and thoughtfully, and stood musing, his mind strangely stirred. Come along, Rat, called Mole. Think of poor Otter waiting up there by the ford. Portly had soon been comforted by the promise of a treat, a jaunt on the river in Mr. Rat's real boat, and the two animals conducted him to the water's side, placed him securely between them in the bottom of the boat, and paddled off down the backwater. The sun was fully up by now and hot on them. Birds sang lustily and without restraint, and flowers smiled and nodded from either bank. But somehow, so thought the animals, with less of richness and blaze of color than they seemed to remember seeing quite recently somewhere. They wondered where. The main river reached again. They turned the boat's head upstream, towards the point where they knew their friend was keeping his lonely vigil. As they drew near the familiar ford, the Mole took the boat into the bank, and they lifted Portly out and set him on his legs on the towpath, gave him his marching orders and a friendly farewell pat on the back, and shoved him out into midstream. They watched the little animal as he waddled along the path contentedly and with importance. Watched him till they saw his muzzle suddenly lift and his waddle break into a clumsy amble as he quickened his pace with shrill whines and wriggles of recognition. Looking up the river, they could see Otter start up, tense and rigid, from out of the shallows where he crouched in dumb patience, and could hear his amazed and joyous bark as he bounded up through the osiers onto the path. Then the Mole, with a strong pull on one with a strong pull on one oar, swung the boat round and let the full stream bear them down again whither it would, their quest now happily ended. I feel strangely tired, Rat, said the Mole, leaning wearily over his oars as the boat drifted. It's being up all night, you'll say, perhaps, but that's nothing. We do as much half the nights of the week at this time of the year. No, I feel as if I had been through something very exciting and rather terrible, and it was just over, and yet nothing particular has happened. Or something very surprising and splendid and beautiful, murmured the Rat, leaning back and closing his eyes. I feel just as you do, Mole, simply dead tired, though not body tired. It's lucky we've got the stream with us to take us home. Isn't it jolly to feel the sun again, soaking into one's bones, and hark to the wind playing in the reeds? It's like music. Far away music, said the Mole, nodding drowsily. So I was thinking, murmured the Rat, dreamful and languid. Dance music, the lilting sort that runs on without a stop, but with words in it, too. It passes into words and out of them again. I catch them at intervals. Then it is dance music once more, and then nothing but the reeds, soft then whispering. "You hear better than I," said the mole sadly. "I cannot catch the words." "Let me try and give them," said the rat softly, his eyes still closed. Now it is turning into words again, faint but clear, lest the awe should dwell and turn your frolic to fret. You shall look on my power at the helping hour, but then you shall forget. Now the reeds take it up. Forget, forget, they sigh, and it dies away in a rustle and a whisper. Then the voice returns. Lest limbs be reddened and rent, I spring the trap that is set. As I loose the snare, you may glimpse me there, for surely you shall forget. Grow nearer, mole, nearer to the reeds. It is hard to catch and grows each minute fainter. Helper and healer I cheer, small waifs in the woodland wet. Strays I find in it, wounds I bind in it, bidding them all forget. Nearer, mole, nearer. No, it is no good. The song has died away into reed talk. But what do the words mean? Asked the wondering mole. That I do not know, said the rat simply. I passed them on to you as they reached me. Ah, now they return again. And this time, full and clear, this time at last it is real, the unmistakable thing, simple, passionate, perfect. Well, let's have it then, said the mole after he had waited patiently for a few minutes, half dozing in the hot sun. But no answer came. He looked and understood the silence. With a smile of much happiness on his face and something of a listening look still lingering there, the weary rat was fast asleep. And here's where we end for today. Young Tales is produced and narrated by Todd Young from Todd Young Online. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe and join us next time for another story. Thank you for your support.